Welcome to Kick 'em in the Head, a podcast that takes an inside look at the world of mixed martial arts, featuring interviews with some of the top fighters from South Africa and around the world, with a focus on the EFC and UFC promotions. I'm your host, Yaw. Join us as we delve deep into the techniques, strategies, and mindsets of these world-class athletes, learning from their experiences and gaining insights into what it takes to succeed in the toughest sport on earth. Welcome back to the Kick 'em in the Head podcast. Today, we're doing a special episode speaking to the first Afrikaans commentator for MMA, not just in South Africa, well, naturally in South Africa, that's where Afrikaans is from, but therefore in the world. Today, we are speaking again to Mr. Stephan DQ Delaray. Stephan, as always, welcome to Kick 'em in the Head.
Thanks for having me again. I feel like a regular now. I feel right at home.
Right at home. And right at home is what I'm assuming you felt like when you were on the mic for what was a historic win, which is really what we're talking about here. The historic win of Dricus Stilnox du Plessis at UFC 297 this past, I think, 2 weeks ago. How was that experience being the first Afrikaans commentator to commentate on such an epic event?
Man, it was amazing. It was being part of history in making history to become the first South African champion and having a little part in that, in being part of the first Afrikaans MMA commentary duo. It was really something special to me. But back to the point of saying I felt right at home, I definitely did not. It was especially in the beginning, learning the craft in English and then trying to educate viewers that what's going on there in another language. That was quite challenging, and the preparation was quite extensive, and the nerves were up. But I had a blast. I got into it quite quickly. I feel I think I can do a lot better going forward. But I had a blast. It was so cool to be part of it.
How long did you actually practice for? Because, like you said, it was your first time. You were a bit nervous. What did you do in preparation? Because MMA mostly is an English sport. BJJ, most of the moves you have in English. So you obviously then had to translate that across, like you said, to an audience that might not be familiar with these moves, whether it be in English or Afrikaans. So how was that mentally in terms of the mental preparation for this?
So in preparation, I pretty much looked at all the terms that's usually used in commentary, all the MMA jargon and specific moves and the names of those. And I came to the conclusion that if we have an uneducated viewer and you use the word kimura, they're not going to know what you're talking about. You're going to have to explain the whole lock from the wrist all the way up to the shoulder. So in Afrikaans, I took an approach of calling everything a lock to the joint they're attacking when we're talking about submissions, and then reverse engineering it from there, saying this is a shoulder lock, and this shoulder lock is done by manipulating the hand to the ceiling in this position. And then, this is also a shoulder lock, but it is with the legs manipulating it this way, So I tried to get a broader term for example, a rear naked choke in Afrikaans sounds horrible. You can't, it sounds...
What is it in Afrikaans?
Yes, see. The direct translation is the van agteraf kaal nek wurggreep, which sounds like something straight from a porno. So I thought that's not appropriate to say on live television. So I just, I went with the same approach, and I went with arm in chokes and clean chokes, and then explained the body mechanic and the mechanism for that specific thing.
Okay, phenomenal. Now, if we have a look at the fight between DDP and Sean Strickland, there wasn't much ground time. So fortunately, I guess you didn't have to explain too many submissions. But how did you find the fight? How was that fight? Watching it live and being the first to commentate on, like I said, what is an epic achievement by the South African Dricus du Plessis. How was the emotion there? Because obviously, being from Team CIT as well, that's one of your compatriots. So how was that emotion?
it was a difficult thing to manage, specifically right through the fight. I'm sitting there in a professional capacity trying to educate viewers on what's going on in the cage, and I have to be objective. But I'm also sitting there as a member of Team CIT, and Drickus is one of my best friends. So it was a hard thing to manage. And there were a couple of times, I don't know if you watch the fight in Afrikaans commentary, you'll hear I go quiet for the middle of the fight for some time, where my partner commentator was like, "Hey, dude, remember you have to speak as well." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's why I'm here." But it was difficult to manage and not let the emotions come through to the viewers. But it still feels like I'm going to wake up and it was all just a dream. So it was an awesome. I've got goosebumps all over my body just speaking about it. It's something that, sitting there in studio watching him walk out, and I'm thinking, like, we've been speaking about this for a decade. We've spoken this into existence long before anyone actually knew what the sport was, who Drickus was, how this works, what the EFC is, where the amateur fighting, pro fighting, UFC. We knew, right? We'd watch fights early in the mornings, and then after the guys, even still when he was a welterweight in the UFC, before he had a belt, we'd watch the fights and we'd look at one another and say, "Fuck, I think you can beat this guy." And then, that started rolling a decade ago. And then, I sat there and I thought, this is crazy. We were just, in my mind, you believe it's possible and you hope, but you think it's just something you say, like, when I grow up, I want to be a fireman.
Not something that
and a decade down the line, here we are, he's fighting for the title, and then he wins it. And when he won that belt, I think the whole South Africa was overcome by emotion. I think specifically us that's been on the journey with him for such a long time. It's a lifetime of work. He's been working towards this since he was born. Since he could walk, he's been doing combat sport, and it's just so special to see a lifetime of hard work pay off.
You mentioned 10 years in the making, which is that's an entire decade, a lifetime of hard work paying off. How was it when he returned home, when he finally got back with the belt onto African soil, as he said, which created the whole beef between him and Israel Adesanya? How was it to see him landing in South Africa as the UFC middleweight champion, holding the belt aloft under the African sun, as he said? How was that feeling?
I have no words. Watching him walk out of that terminal with that belt above his head was, once again, we're in a movie, my man. And this is, I watched it and I was like, yes, I've seen this before in my dreams. And, we've spoken about this. And then you have this feeling of, is this real? Like, is this real? And when you realize it was frantic. Obviously, there were a ludicrous amount of people, and everyone was jumping at him and trying to get a second of his time or a picture or whatever. But just to be there and watch that, it's a feeling that you cannot describe unless you've experienced it.
Yeah, no, that's quite true. I was there at the airport as well. We did bump into each other at OR Tambo.
Yeah.
And I've lived in South Africa my whole life. Never have I been to the airport for any victory. I love the box, but I didn't go to the airport. I love the sporting teams. Every time everyone comes back, we've got lots of champions from the past. We've got Caster Semenya. We've got lots of previous champions. But for this one, I had to be there because of the gravitas of how he got there. Like I said, not only just 10 years in the making, but also with where he started by saying, I want to bring this home to Africa. That for me was... It was a signal that no matter who you are, if you love Africa, you have the passion for Africa, you're African. And that's pretty much what he was trying to say in his, I guess, when he was speaking to say, I'm the true African, I will be the true African champ, was I am here. I love this continent. No matter what, I am here. So for me, it was absolutely phenomenal. And the passion of the crowd was amazing. So thank you so much for having been there and being part of all this. So being part of Team CIT, you mentioned earlier, how has this win now galvanized the entire team? Because you now have a world champion at your gym?
I think there's two aspects of that. There's the pro team aspect, and everyone. I mean, Trickers has achieved so much. We've realized early that, hey, we can do this. I mean, look at this guy. He's setting an example for us to a level that is difficult to understand. But if we do what he does and we stick to the same, if we are this committed, we can achieve this. And the vibe has just exploded in the team after he came home with a belt. Everyone is super motivated. Everyone is super excited. And everyone wants to achieve what he has achieved because we now saw it is possible. So on that side, in the pro team, and then on the other side, the excitement of the youngsters coming in wanting to get involved in the sport has been amazing. To see parents on board bringing their kids to learn the skills, whether it be to compete or just to have a little bit more confidence, just some skills to defend themselves, whatever the case may be. The acceptance of the sport overnight was very apparent. And to see, listen, this is a legit mainstream sport that we're happy to take our kids to. And 5 years ago, that wasn't the case. I mean, when I started fighting, I did it behind my parents' backs. I would tell them I'm going away for a chomi with a friend for the weekend, and I'd sleep at his house and go fight the next day and come back on Sunday. Where today it has changed completely. And that's thanks to guys like Conor McGregor bringing the sport to the mainstream, and then Dricus du Plessis, who made it mainstream here and made people understand that it's stand-up guys that are involved in the sport. It's not a bunch of, deaf, common people. It's stand-up guys that dedicate their lives to being a sportsman with discipline and honor. And I believe he showed that to South Africa to say, listen, although we get in a cage and try to kill each other, there's a certain level of sportsmanship, respect, and skill that goes with this whole thing. And it's not as bloodthirsty as you make it out to be.
Yeah, that's quite true. When you look at MMA from the outside, a lot of people think that it's a bloodthirsty sport. It's violent. It's a bunch of riffraffs running around trying to kill each other, like you said. But when you get closer to it, it's a very, very technical sport of a competition between two individuals trying to outskill each other. That's all it really is. And I must say, the number of casuals or amateurs, not even amateurs, of people who've never seen MMA or watched MMA that I introduce MMA to, all of them have the same sentiment of, wow, it's not quite what I thought. I really like this. That's always the sentiment across the board. So like you said, those guys, Conor McGregor, made it fully mainstream internationally. And then we have the Dricus du Plessis, who's now brought it back home to South Africa to give us some form of mainstream view of it, to know that this is not a violent sport. It's just a sport, whether it be like a karate or a judo. It's just a sport. Come and engage the sport. So absolutely phenomenal that the gym, Team CIT, has basically gotten some of the benefits of this high-profile fight, this high-profile MMA fight that has brought MMA back home to South Africa to say that this is a normal sport. South Africans, jump on board.
Yeah, so that's something that we've been working towards for a long time. I mean, if you look at Team CIT and the EFC, we always have a uniform. We all look the same. We all fight in the same shorts. We've tried for a long time to legitimize the sport just from the image that we put out there. And I think we as a team and the MMA community as a whole has done a really, really good job over the past couple of years. But this changed everything. I mean, people were calling me asking, this Dricus guy that's fighting for a world title, how does the sport, we're going to watch, but we have no clue how this works. We have no clue what the sport is, but we're going to be up to watch him. And I mean, just in my parents' house, I walk in and catch my mom watching fights without anyone she knows on them. She's gotten into the sport. My uncle is at the point where they want to take his phone when he goes anywhere because he doesn't come back. And when they find him, he's 7 Demetrius Johnson fights in. So I think that's the impact of that is a lot bigger than a lot of people realize.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, MMA can become a bit addictive, especially when you start to follow the storylines and start to understand the fighters behind the fights. Like you said, he was watching 7-8 Demetrius Johnson, the GOAT, one of my goats, matches, fights. If you get into John Jones's story, you start to watch his fights, you can go really, really deep. If you go into just looking at each of the divisions in the UFC, you can go really, really deep. And that's not even coming back home to South Africa, the EFC, which I think last year they did 2.6 billion views on YouTube with their content of all the past fights. So it's very, very easy to fall down that slippery slope of MMA once you get into it, because it is that enjoyable and it is that good, especially with guys like you out there who are making sure that everyone understands and is educated in different languages about what is happening and what is MMA and how you fight and what a Kimura is in Afrikaans. And what's a Kimura in Afrikaans? I'm so curious.
A Kimura in Afrikaans is a Kimura. It is named after the gentleman that did it first. So it's a name. It's his name. So that'll always stay the same. It's like London doesn't change in any other language, or it's a name. So that'll stay the same. But if I just jump out there and say, oh, he's got the Kimura, and, I'm talking to the Afrikaans viewership, which, when we're talking about the English viewership, I think there's a lot more of them that are a bit more open-minded, that got clued up about the sport before the fight. I think in the Afrikaans community, specifically the older Afrikaans community, a lot of people had absolutely no clue what they were watching. So to jump in there and just reference specific names without people understanding that a Kimura is an attack to the shoulder, bending the rotator cuff in a way it doesn't want to bend until the pain is so much he submits or it breaks. That's a better, or I thought that would be a better way to get the information through to the viewer than just latching onto the names.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. Who do you want to see Dricus fight next?
That's an interesting one. I think, to be honest, in my ideal world, I would like Alex Pereira, which is now with his new fight booking. But initially I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to, I don't remember who said it, but one of the ex-UFC stars said it, I don't know if it was Charles, it made sense to me, is if Pereira comes down, faces Dricus at 85, and Dricus beats him, he gets an immediate shot at 205, he wins there, he's double division champion, he comes back down, defends against Izzy, and then we in GOAT conversation in a question of 3-4 fights. So that's how I hope it played out. It seems that might not be the case with Pereira seemingly being booked against Tom Aspinall. So I believe it seems that way. I'm not sure if that's confirmed by the UFC. I saw a couple of leaked posts and this and that, but I'm not sure if it's been confirmed by the company. But if that's the case, there's only one fight that makes sense, and that is Israel Adesanya on African soil. On South African soil, in the champ's home country. That's the only thing that makes sense. That's the fight that the fans want to see. That's the money fight. There's been this beef going on for how long? I mean, that makes sense to me from a business perspective, from our perspective, a fighting perspective, a fan perspective. If Pereira is not on the cards, then Israel Adesanya on African soil.
I don't think Pereira is going to be on the card simply because of the weight cut. That's one of the reasons he left that division, was he was like, the weight cuts were brutal. So
yeah, I know, but he did make a couple of insinuations that he'll do it one last time just to fight Dricus. So when I saw those couple of tweets, I was like, hey man, put your money where your mouth is and drop that weight.
And come get it.
Yeah.
Izzy, do you think Izzy deserves another title shot? Because that's then really the question. It's not about should Dricus fight Izzy, but does Izzy deserve another title shot now is the question.
Who else?
So the Americans are saying Strickland again, but I mean, no one really wants to see that right now. Why?
Fuck that fight. There's only one other fight. If you said one other name, I would have said you had a fair argument. That's Jared Cannonier. The problem with Jared Cannonier, it's not such a big sellable fight like the Izzy fight. So the only one guy that I honestly believe that if they give him that fight, I would be like, no, he's honestly deserved it. It's Cannonier. Otherwise, it's only Izzy. Who else?
That's true. The Killer Gorilla has been putting in the work. He's been getting the wins. He's just not been as vocal as he needs to be since Dricus healed from that foot injury. Jared's gone a little bit quiet. Before Dricus came back, he was saying me, put me in there. And then once Sean got the nod from Izzy, he just kind of disappeared. So that's a very good point. Maybe he will be back to stake his claim.
It's really out of character for him to be on the mic. Jared Cannonier is not that type of guy. He loves what he does, and he really just tries to provide for his family. He's not the most marketable guy in the world because he's not trying to be. I think that's a big thing about him also is I think he needs to be authentic to himself to perform the way he performs. And unfortunately, he's not the guy that speaks a bunch of shit on the mic. So he doesn't get the fights he deserves always. But I think him going quiet after Strickland getting that fight might have been a bit of frustration because, in my opinion, he deserved that fight more than Strickland did in that situation.
And I guess it speaks to the fact that Strickland was a one-and-done champ, with all due respect to him. Maybe it just wasn't his right time. Not that he shouldn't or would never have been the champ, but like you're saying, maybe it was actually Jared's turn to get that shot.
He would have never been the champ.
Because he was.
I honestly believe
7. When was
I'm not looking at rankings. I'm looking at styles make fights. He had the perfect style to fight Izzy. He took a front hand defense. He used a lot of parries and deflections. He also walked him down. He didn't try and rush him. And if you look back at Izzy's knockouts, every single knockout he scored, he was rushed. Okay. In the UFC, when Robert Whittaker rushed him, he clipped him with a left hook. When Paulo Costa rushed him, he clipped him. When we talk about the Yoel Romero fights, when we talk about other fights that he's had that hasn't been the Anderson Silva fight, there's so many fights where he wasn't rushed, and kind of the same thing happened, right? Where it was a bit of a stalemate. Izzy wasn't getting anything off, and so but he did more than his opponent, so he still won the fight. This was a situation where it was the same style, except other than Romero and Anderson Silva, they weren't taking their foot off the pedal. Sean Strickland was in his face the whole time, and he didn't stop throwing punches. But not once did he rush him. Not once did he try and close a big gap between him and Adesanya. Because Izzy's timing is too good there. He's going to take his head off the center and he's going to clip you with something, and you're going to feel it. That's why he knocked out Rob. And if you look at the second fight at Rob, he also didn't rush him. That's where Izzy is I believe Sean Strickland had the perfect game plan and the perfect style on the night. I also believe that wasn't the best Izzy we've seen. I believe he's a lot better than that. I believe he was off. I believe all of the negative energy from the fans that he got before the fight really affected him. And he tried to go out there with a fuck you attitude, but I don't think that's who he is. I think he thrives on positive energy.
That's a very good point. He didn't do any of his traditional, like his Naruto move, nothing. He did nothing that was quintessentially Izzy before that fight. So I completely take that. He didn't seem himself before the Sean Strickland fight. So I guess that is what resulted in the loss. But here we go. We've now got Dricus as the champion, who's about to most possibly and most hopefully give Izzy another shot at the middleweight title. Unless Pereira steps in.
Yeah, and I've got a message. If you don't thrive well under negative energy, don't come fight Dricus here. I think a lot of people underestimate how patriotic and how South African fans are. It's irrelevant of we back our boys to the end and we go extreme with it. So if Izzy wants a good shot, he should fight him in his hometown to get all the positive energy he can, because he's not going to feel anything yet.
And I see that we're trying to fill up Loftus with the Bulls versus the Stormers, which means that it could be a precursor for when the fight gets to South Africa.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I think there's a lot of options now. Now that it's a possibility, you know, there's a lot of people putting up their hands saying, "Hey, we'd love it. We'd love to host it. This is the infrastructure we have. This is what we can do." You know, I think Pretoria, Cape Town. I think there's a lot of people who is really campaigning to get the fight. So we'll see. I think we have the infrastructure. I think we have the stadiums, and we have the everything we need to host it. So I hope the UFC makes it happen.
The UFC better make it happen, because we're looking forward to seeing all of them and the superstars here for what would be the first UFC Africa, which, as we know, Dana White has been planning for a while. But don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to anyone who's listening. Stephan DQ Delaware, one of the best fighters in the EFC, who has an injury right now, actually. Tell us about your injury and what's happening, unless that's confidential.
Nah, I don't have all the info yet, so it's a difficult thing to tell you. I can tell you I've got a wrist injury. The severity we're not sure of. We're doing a couple of tests. I did an MRI and some X-rays, so we'll see what the smart doctors say, what the plan is going forward.
Well, we hope that injury clears up really soon, that we get to see you back in the Hex very soon, or at least one of your proteges, because obviously as a coach you train lots and lots of fighters.
You'll see a couple this year for sure, making the step up to the pro scene. That, you know, obviously they'll move on from me to Coach Mornay, but you'll see a couple of my guys that's been putting in the work the last couple of years to make the step up to the pro scene.
Phenomenal. Any names you can drop for us?
Tapelo Siabi, Ryan De Jager. I know it's the March boy, but I love him to death, and I've been working with him a little bit. Ntando Zondi is going to be a force to be reckoned with. We've got a couple of guys, and we've got a couple of good guys that are so close to making the breakthrough that within the next couple of months, Tyden Lamprecht, you're going to see him very soon as well. So we've got an immensely talented stable, and I think we've gotten to a point in the system that we will be feeding the pro scene every year with our amateurs that make a step up.
Phenomenal. I'm really looking forward to this coming year. I'm really looking forward to chatting to you again and seeing you again sometime very soon with the title, I hope.
Definitely.
Stephan, thank you so much for your time. To anyone listening, don't forget to kick him in the head.
Cheers. Thanks for having me. Cheers.